So welcome everybody. I do appreciate the participation we've had in these meetings, and I think some people are viewing my poorly crafted videos on YouTube. I'm not very good at the video editing, but I'm learning fast as we go. So I'm going to start off with degree days here. I updated this morning, so it's accurate through midnight. So it includes yesterday's data. And quite impressive here if you look at how fast we've gained degree days. So yesterday when I did this, looking down here at the bottom, my kind of running total week to week, we were 5 days behind base 42. We had gained 4 days from the previous week. And we've actually, just since yesterday, gained another day. This unusual high temperatures is really bringing us back to closer to normal for degree days. And then for base 50, we were last week 2 weeks behind. Yesterday we were 7 days behind, and we've gained 2 more days. And now we're only 5 days behind normal averages through May 26th, from January 1 to May 26th. So it's actually quite amazing to move degree days that quickly. So most stations are fairly similar. It's still seeing the more southern stations like Standale is a little farther along at 6:30, and the farthest north station I look at is the Baseline Road Station north of Fremont is 5:17. Everyone else is kind of running in the middle between 5:60 and 5:80, which is, again, about 4 days behind normal averages for 40 years of data. And we've shot forward pretty quickly in degree days base 50 because of the warm temperatures. Very warm nights have pushed that development as well. I added in just an extra column here for the rain last night. Many places saw a little bit of rain right around the supper hour. Not everybody saw that, so you'll see when you're looking at your scab infections, if you look at various stations, make sure you pay attention because not everybody had rain yesterday. The same thing's happening today. There's pop-up showers that are occurring, and so some places are going to get rain and some places are not. It's currently raining here at my house at Kennewan 12 Mile, or it was. And I did want to mention here about the Kent City station. The last 2 days it's recorded 1/3 of an inch yesterday and 1/4 of an inch the day before. 99.9% sure that is not true. And it's right there by Pete Nyblad's house, and he says he didn't see any rain. So we're back to having problems with this Kent City rain gauge or station or something. Phil and I replaced that, thought we had it fixed back in April, and now it seems to be still giving us fits. So anyway, if you're following Kent City data, you may want to jump down to the Sparta North station or the Grant station to get a little bit, to verify what the station is seeing something very strange. So anyway, looking ahead at the forecast, we're in for another couple of humid days. Today is not going to be 90 degrees like yesterday, but it's still going to be quite humid and a lot of moisture in the air until this system moves through tomorrow on Thursday, which will bring the potential for showers and storms. Hopefully nothing with anything dangerous in it, but when the air gets this warm, there's a lot of convection and we get these fast pop-up showers. If they come fast, they don't usually have as much time to develop hail and high winds, but we'll just have to pay attention. Tomorrow might be the worst chance for severe weather, more so than today. And now I see they've extended some rain into Friday morning, which wasn't there yesterday, I think, either. And then this cool system, a more northerly based system, moves in, and we're going to be under high pressure and a lot of nice, pleasant, better sleeping weather than we've had the last few days. And then it's right now looking like several days before we have a chance of rain again. This is the Wonderground, just a different way to look at the forecast, and you can see this potential for rain here. today into Thursday, and they have a little bit of showers carried over into Friday morning as well. And then there's no blue line here at all for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So I look at several forecasts to get a feel for, what's common across all of them. And not having rain is pretty common for this coming weekend. And then again, they have chances for rain on Tuesday as well. So you can see the black line is barometric pressure. So that high pressure is going to keep the clouds and rain away. And then that starts to drop a bit into next week, and will allow some more of what they're saying might be more hot and humid weather coming in late next week as well. I'm going to talk a little bit longer about insects because we went from the ice chest to the sauna here in just a short time. We've been not having much activity with insects, but if you look at the degree days, and I've kind of circled that here with the Apple Pest Guide, we're right here in this timeline around between 500 and 600 degree days, base 42, and you can see there's a lot of red and there's a lot of colored bars in this pest guide. This is the newer version that has some disease added in at the bottom. The old version just had insects. So we're moving into petal fall here, so let's talk about that a little bit. The biggest concern I have right now is plum curculio, and this picture was sent to me yesterday evening by Jim Engelsma. Those are very fresh scars. So just as I expected, plum curculio was going to, be out of the gate with this warm weather. Anytime we have temperatures above 60 degrees at night, plum curculio will become very active. And I can't say these are from Jim's orchard. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing they might be because the advanced stage that they're in, probably along a woodlot there. And so even though you have teeny tiny little fruits right now, as some things still have petals on them, they're still susceptible to plum curculio when all the conditions are right. Now the cooler weather moving in will probably slow them down a little bit, but I don't think you should drag out your petal fall sprays too much. Just make sure your bees, of course, are out and your neighbor's bees are out before you move forward with that. Next up is codling moth. We've seen an uptick in traps. I have a feeling, I haven't set a biofix yet, but I'll probably end up setting a biofix somewhere in this warm weather spell that we've had. Some people with high pressure have been catching codling moth kind of slowly for the last week or so, and many have told me they've seen a big jump. We typically catch our first codling moth between, it's a wide range depending on the spring weather, between 250 and 370. And so we're at about 250, 260 right now with the last day of warm weather in here. So it's time for them to be out. If you don't have your mating disruption pheromone up, you need to get that done ASAP. If you don't have traps up, you need to get that done ASAP as well, so that you're making sure you set a good biofix. For those of you that have, particularly if you've been doing mating disruption for some time now, or you just have really low pressure, you may not catch them for a few more days, although this warm weather is quite favorable for them to be out and active. Aphids, I can find some rosy apple aphids curled up in, these are in non-sprayed trees. All of you do a good job and keep the aphids away. But this would be one perhaps you may be targeting at petal fall as well as other species of aphids too. I haven't seen any beneficials in these populations, but they're really just getting started. The beneficials always kind of come after. You got to have food before they show up. So I expect by next week we'll probably, at least in the next week or 10 days, we'll start seeing some of those beneficials move into populations. Oblique banded leaf roller are getting kind of large in size. I haven't seen any pupating yet, but it typically happens sometime around petal fall, and this is not really the best time to really go after them because they're quite large, although there could be small ones still present as they become active. They're overwinter as small larvae, but they've been slowly growing in size, and the threshold right now is if you find one terminal infested in a tree, regardless of the size of its tree, there is a fancy formula for it, but I kind of like the one terminal. It's a little bit easier to remember. Then that means you might have a population, and perhaps you would want to go after them. This is some wonderful weather for using BT. BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, does wonderful in warm weather, mainly because the insects are feeding and they tend to take up a bigger dose and you get more activity that way. So consider that if you've had problems with OBLR. The summer adults don't start flying typically until early June, so it'll be a couple weeks before we need to get traps up for them. San Jose scale, males have been flying now in southern areas for a couple of weeks, 10 days or so, and particularly for 2 solid weeks at the Trevor Nichols Station, where I like to watch what their trap line does, because, you know, they rear insects there, so they see them there first before commercial orchards do. If you're trapping for San Jose scale males, they're extremely small. I got this picture really blown up. And this makes it like it would be easy to identify, but it's not. This is more what they look like when you see them on a trap, on a sticky trap, and that's assuming that there aren't flower petals and all kinds of other insects stuck on there. And because they're very tiny and very easy to overlook in a trap, and very difficult to trap because you have to get them in a spot where you know you have active scale going on. So when they're not stuck to a trap, that's kind of what they look like. Right now you can find the scales on the branches as well, the overwintering scales that are out there. Just keep an eye on that one. I'll probably typically we set a biofix for that around the same time as codling moth, right around bloom. But I haven't really heard of too much with trap catches around here. Oriental fruit moth, I started the model for Oriental fruit moth. They've been kind of flying lightly for a couple of weeks, but it's been so cool that they, I think, haven't been extremely active, so I was hesitant to set a biofix. So I finally set one for May 22nd because that was kind of the first warmish day, and they really seemed to start filling the traps then. And so if we use the degree day model, since then we've had, by the end of today, it'll be 136 or so degree days, base 45. And when we get to about 160, 170 is when we think we have 8 to 10% egg hatch, and that's when your first cover sprays are needed in stone fruits to prevent flagging of tissue like this picture on the slide. We don't need to worry about first generation in apples at this time. It's really mainly a stone fruit pest. So for those of you that, particularly in peaches, you're going to need to think about applications for Oriental fruit moth by the end of this week, first of next week at the latest. European red mite, there's egg hatch going on now, and I think they're moving along pretty quickly. The heat is something that really favors mite development. So the timing with petal fall applications with your petal fall miticides will be really very good this year. You should get some good activity with those small little nymphs that are out there. Black stem borer adults became active in the warm weather as well, just as I figured they would. And you can start to see some of this early indication where the beetles have bored into the side of branches or trunks mainly, and sometimes scaffold limbs too. And they push out this little sawdust toothpick. Looks like a piece of a toothpick stuck in there. It's very delicate, so if you get any rain, it'll wash off pretty easily, but they are out there and active as well. So keep an eye on that. I still firmly believe that if your tree is injured and it's sending off ethanol to signal, that's what these insects cue into. The tree is already injured for some reason, and usually that reason is probably going to be the death of that tree before this insect is, but it's still something to keep an eye on. White apple leafhopper, first hatch has occurred. So if you see they'll be tiny like this little nymph here on the picture. If you see any adult leafhoppers at this time, they're most likely potato leafhoppers. They're usually bright green, and they come up on southerly based storms, which we haven't. That's kind of where a lot of this rain has been, moving straight out of the south as it pops up. It's not really frontal rain so much as it is convection rain, but it's just, if you see adults, it's most likely potato leafhopper, and the nymphs that you see right now are white apple leafhopper. It's the only time of year that it's really easy to tell the two of them apart because they're different life stages. But you might target that with your petal fall sprays as well. I can see some tarnished plant bugs when if I walk through orchards and if there's broadleaf weeds, but I haven't seen any damage to fruit, and I'm not very concerned about them at this time. Spotted tenniform leaf miner, again, is not a big pest. I had to go way back into my pictures from 2001 to find a picture of what kind of was more normal years ago with spotted tenniform leaf miner. So these are tissue feeders, and quite a number of them on a given leaf. This was probably an abandoned orchard as well. That's the best place to get good pictures, but this has not been a pest that we have seen much of in the last few years. And then green fruitworm as well. Not a major pest, but every year I see a little bit more of this type of damage where big chunks of the apples are missing, or here's a small one on the side of this small apple. So it's just one to kind of keep an eye on. I don't think you need to have traps up for it, but the damage is pretty easy to identify from the damage. There's actually 2 or 3 different species of insects that get lumped in together as green fruitworm. So just some things to keep in mind when you're getting ready to do your petal fall sprays. Some of you may have even started as well. Make sure your neighbor's bees are out as well as yours. I know we know that our own bees have to be out, but if you have any ragtag bloom, bees might still be active in it, so they're still coming to your orchard. So do be mindful of that. We have to be environmental stewards all the time, and we don't need anybody saying we're spraying bees. Be careful, as Phil mentioned last week, with too many things in the tank. It's easy to want to do or have to do, even, as many of our pesticides are pretty well targeted towards certain classes of insects. We don't technically use big broad spectrum types of products anymore, like the OPs and things like that. So just be careful with too many things in the tank. And as Phil mentioned, if you think if you're getting up to 6 or 7 things, leave the nutrition out. Be careful with anything with oils or ECs, so that you don't get any injury. Small little apples are very, very tender right now, and if you have good fruit finish, if you didn't have issues, I'm thinking we're going to see some fruit finish issues with the frost that we had earlier. But if you don't have that, you don't want to cause that. And that fuzzy little layer on apples right now can easily be injured, and you end up with russet later on. I think this year for your petal fall sprays, it's going to be better to be too early than too late. I know petal fall can have a lot of different definitions depending on what it is you're doing and what it is you're going after, but I wouldn't wait too long. Insects have just really become quite active, and particularly your biggest targets are plum curculio. Their activity will slow down with the cooler weather. They have nights in the 40s, which will not be very favorable for plum curculio, but they're out there right now doing damage. I just got a text from someone that said they found damage here on the ridge at Fruit Ridge and 10 Mile. So that's one you don't want to wait on. The aphids we mentioned, particularly rosy apple aphids, mites, your petal fall spray is going to time well. And of course your disease sprays, apple scab, mildews, loving this warm, moist weather right now. And then perhaps still fire blight if you have some bloom. I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. So let's jump into apple scab here. So this is the Sparta Station data. And so last night we had a little light shower right around supper time. It was wet for about 3 hours. There's only 0.04 of an inch of rain. Of course, not an infection. I did find, when I checked spore rods this morning, 195 spores. So they were much less on. There was a lot of stuff on my spore rods because it's been dry for about 10 days. So if your allergies are bothering you, I could see all those pollen, all the pollen that's on my spore rods. It's making your eyes itch and your nose run. But our numbers are tracking down, which is exactly what we want to see. We're at yesterday 810. By today, or by the end of yesterday, we were at 815 degree days, base 32. I set that back to 0 up here at Green Tip. That puts us at 96, 97, 98% of the way there for scab development. This sigmoidal curve indicates the development of ascospore, or the maturity of ascospores. And we're now here at this final phase above 700 degree days, base 32. I converted it, from this paper, it's in Celsius, so I converted it to Fahrenheit for you. So we're in this final phase. We're at 800, almost 900 degree days, base 32. When we get to just over 1,000 degree days, base 32, that's when maturity ends. That doesn't mean primary scab is over. It just means spores should be mature, and that's going to happen. I went through degree days in various stations. It's going to happen over the weekend. So you need 4 or 5 more days to get everything mature. You people down in Standale will probably be mature maybe on the 30th of May. And those of you farther north, say on Fremont, might need until the 2nd or 3rd of June to get all your spores mature. Then we need 1 or 2 nice rains, preferably daytime rains, late afternoon rains in warm conditions to release all those spores. So it's likely you're going to have perhaps 10 more days of primary scab to stay on top of. It kind of all depends on what kind of rain we get after we reach maturity of all these spores. So I did the estimate for Sparta Station will hit over that 1,000 mark by June 1st. And then the stations north of that, maybe a couple days later, the stations south of that, a couple days sooner. This is the RimPro output for the Sparta Station. So the blue line is where I grabbed this morning at 9:30. You can see this light little rain from last week. There's something weird going on with RimPro this year. They get their data from a system called MeteoBlue. So it's not necessarily coming right from the Sparta Station. So that's unfortunate. It's not matching very well this year. And I hear from some colleagues around the country that they've noticed some odd things too. So I have an email into the authors of that system and haven't heard back yet. So, but what they're predicting is, so here we are on the 27th. This was 9 a.m., this blue line. And here's tomorrow, the 28th. It's kind of hard to, you just got to pay attention to the bolded numbers are the dates. The lighter text are the hours within that date, military hours. So with the rain today, there was really no rain predicted for this morning, but it happened anyway. The rain for tonight and tomorrow that they're predicting, and maybe even Friday, they're predicting some small amounts, these little yellow bars of spores. And even out here, way out on June 2nd, remember I said I didn't think we would have all our spores mature until the 1st or 2nd of June. There's still the potential for some spores. So it's not over yet. Just keep going. For the Standale Station, you did not receive that rain last night, at least according to your station data, but maybe you've had some rain today. You can see they're a little farther ahead, almost to 1,000 degree days, base 32. And in abandoned trees now, I should mention, you can see these first 3 infections showing up. I don't think I'm seeing the one yet from the 27th, the rain that occurred on the 17th. I think it's just a little too soon yet to see that, but we have not had very many actual infections. We've had quite a bit of rain, but they've been kind of lumped together. And here's the Standale predictions from RimPro showing the same thing. Chances for rain afternoon today, tomorrow, and Friday. And even Standale has, I think I blew it up in the next picture, has a little bit of chance for some spores, probably the final amount of spores for Standale into early next week. And maybe for some of the other stations, we might need through the end of next week to get through primary scab. I included Fremont just because it's the farthest station. The Etna station is up on Baseline Road, and they're only at 760, so they've got a little ways to go yet. You probably have to add on a couple more days. And there is a RimPro site for Fremont showing really exactly the same data. It's probably using the similar data. And then I included Belding. I've been kind of neglectful of Belding to keep this short, but you didn't have the rain last night that some of the stations got. Perhaps you've had rain today, but do be on the lookout for these infections to be showing up and present in your orchards. And again, I think you're going to need until probably the 10th of June to get through primary as well. So moving on to fire blight. This is the Standale data, and I updated it this morning. So it's got yesterday's actual temperatures in it. There was no rainfall at Standale, so it just continues to ride here at a high risk. But you can see the EIP values are extremely high still. And then for today, I had to look this up. I didn't think that it could go over 400, but it's actually 558 for the Standale station, extremely high. So if you got rain today, I don't know why there's no rain in here. I probably put it in here, but it just didn't show up on the printout. If it did rain, this would be an infection. The other thing about, as we get here with fire blight towards the end, that ragtag bloom can still be a source of infection for you. So don't let it pass you by, or don't, especially with these kind of numbers of EIP. If the numbers were marginal, you know, close to 100 and only a bit of bloom, you can play that game, but I don't think you should play games with these kind of numbers. The other thing that is starting to occur in the Mary blight system is this column over here on the right for canker. It's just a running total through the season. It starts with that first green that you put into Mary blight. It's showing that canker margin symptoms should be showing up anytime now, and it's usually pretty accurate. So you add more inoculum with oozing cankers in the system, and then all of this high potential for blossom blight infection as well. I am keeping bloom going. In Mary blight, as soon as you put PF in this column for growth stage, it shuts all this off. And of course, then your risk for blossom blight is over. But until I don't see any ragtag bloom, and on some new varieties, that seems to be the norm more than the exception, is to have a lot of ragtag bloom and bloom on 1-year-old wood that's yet to even open. But you can see as we move into later or the weekend with that cooler weather, the risk is going down significantly, and then there'll be less bloom as well. So that's Standale. Here's Sparta. What did I do here? Okay, Sparta, this is what I had yesterday for you when I put this together. So there was 0.04 of an inch of rain, which triggered a full infection because all 4 parameters for blossom blight infection were fulfilled, and EIP was quite high. And then today it wasn't supposed to rain, and then I didn't put any rain in just to see what would happen. And what that does is keep everything at just a high risk because the rain is missing. That's this column right here, W, for a wetting event. And then it switches to moderate as the cooler weather moves in. But since it rained this morning, I added in, or it was actually, rain was coming, and so I added in just 1/100 of an inch. That's all that's needed to trigger an infection for today. I added 1/10 of an inch in for tomorrow, and what Mary blight does is if it gets more than 1/10 of an inch, it will trigger not only an infection for that day, but the potential for blossom blight infection the next day, because that is a heavier amount of rainfall. It's not a lot of rain still, but 1/10 of an inch is enough to move more bacteria down into flower parts and potentially cause a worst case scenario. But that risk is going to drop way off when we move into the weekend. And maybe for some of you, if you are done with bloom, there is no risk for blossom blight anymore. For the Sparta station, the data is showing canker margin symptoms to show up starting on Sunday. So a little bit delayed there because it's a little cooler than Standale. The other thing that Mary Blight will do is predict symptoms. So here, if you have an infection, I'm gonna go back to, okay, yeah. If you have an infection for Sparta, it starts doing a running total of numbers here in this column called Blossom. And when it gets to 98 or 99, I think, or 100 for all intensive purposes, it will tell you when symptoms should show up. And I think that's probably going to be, with the cooler weather moving in, it's going to delay that a bit, that development. But probably by middle or end of next week, we might start to see some early fire blight symptoms. And the Mary Blight predicts this as the first symptom, where you hardly even notice it, but it's just the starting of wilting of tissue on it, and it predicts that very well. So I'll continue to track that, and by next week when we meet again, we'll talk more about it. When it gets like this, you know, a couple days later, or if you have really warm weather by the end of the day, it can look like this. That's when you really notice fire blight, of course. And hopefully we don't see that. I know you guys have been working hard. I hear the sprayers running, and I hope you're using Apogee religiously to help prevent fire blight from running on you. And then, of course, when you start seeing oozing, that just adds, again, more inoculum. And then if we get any storms or anything that come in and ripping and tearing of foliage or hail, it just gets everything all whooped up, and then we end up with some trauma blight situations. So hopefully that doesn't happen either. One of the other things that happens this time of year is Nectria twig blight starts showing up. And you start seeing this is Rome's here. And they'll start flagging over, and you'll panic because you'll think it's fire blight, but look a little closer and you'll usually see this sunken area on the twig, or you'll see this sporulation happening on this little fat tissue that Rome's, Fuji's, Rome's in particular get that, Gala can get that as well. That sometimes is and I doubt we'll see much of it this year because we had a fairly mild winter. So this little area, sometimes people call it a purse. This little area gets winter injury a little bit, and Nectria is an opportunistic fungi. It moves into that tissue and causes some damage, and it restricts it and pinches it off, and then you get the flagging over of tissue. So Romes have that quite normally, so do Gala, but other varieties that are more common to get Nectria are Fuji, Empire, Northern Spy, and sometimes Granny Smith. It always shows up right about the same time we're looking for first fire blight symptoms. So just make sure you double check, particularly if you're looking in these varieties. Mildew has been in heaven this week with the warmer and moister conditions that we've had. It doesn't necessarily need rainfall to develop. In fact, it likes just high humidity. This is the data from mildew for RimPro. And it told us during this warmer, humid weather, we were at a stage where quite a bit of the potential for airborne conidia was there, and infection may have occurred back here earlier last week, or I guess the end of last week, and perhaps a little bit with the rain that we just got. The other thing I think this tells me is that when are you going to have secondary, when are these symptoms going to start producing more spores, and that's going to continue to increase, of course, as the season goes. What I also think it's telling me is we should be seeing symptoms of mildew at any time now. Hopefully not, because it was cool up until just these last few days, but it's certainly, if it's out there, it's certainly going to have the right conditions to get a foothold. And I hope you've had something in the tank for mildew over the past week, and you probably should add something here going forward with this petal fall spray, just because of the type of weather we're in right now. So that's all I have. I think I'll just wait and take questions at the end. You can add things in the chat. I see Tom Olker. Oh, he just told me, sorry, that was privately, that he had 200 of an inch of rain down at his place. So light showers are in the area. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Phil. I'm going to stop sharing. It's all yours.
Okay. Well, Amy, you are just full of good news. You know that? You
It's
should
that
work,
time of year. It's the
you should work
yeah.
for the COVID-19 task force.
No, there's too many big heads on that. I don't want to be a part of it.
Okay, let's see if it comes up here. No luck, huh?
I just see a black screen so far.
Now you see anything?
I see yep, you're good to go.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll move right along here. This is Ida Red this morning. 9 millimeters is the large one, so we're going to move into thinning here really quick. We missed the 6 millimeter stage on Ida Reds, but they're going to grow fast. Also, there's reports of Honeycrisp having bud death up north. I'll show you some pictures of that. And I talked about hedging in the past. Italy reported that we should hedge around the 12th leaf stage. I counted them this morning. They're at 12 leaves right now. This hot weather really moves things along. So here's some buds that were damaged by the winter, I think last fall, perhaps. The spur is killed by the winter damage, and it shows up as these drying up, desiccated buds. If you cut into the wood, it's usually dead right to the branch, but the lateral branch there is healthy and green. We've had some wonderful bee activity, pollination weather, and fertilization weather. I've shown you this before. In 2016, it was 52 degrees was the average temperature during the bloom period. And this year, for 2020, we're actually above normal, 62 degrees Fahrenheit average temperature for bloom weather. 60 is the average. 62 was this year's average. So the flowers are fertilized in a little over 2 days. It's really quick, and that's why they went into petal fall so fast. I'd like to start talking about the apple carbohydrate model, because you're going into thinning weather right now. You just got done spraying for fire blight, scab, and other things, and you got to get right back on the sprayer and spray again for thinning. The carbohydrate model has some new things in it that they put in the model last year. First of all, you got to enter your green tip date or your bloom date. If you don't know those, will automatically estimate them, and the estimate is pretty darn good. It also has percent flowering spurs that you have to enter, or it will automatically put in 51 to 75%. The reason for this entry is if you get heavy bloom, they're going to encourage you to up your rates. And then this year and last year, for the first time, we have a 7-day model instead of a 4-day model. They've dropped the 4-day model, and they've also added this degree days accumulated since full bloom at 4 degrees Celsius. Their thinning recommendations are color-coded. High risk is red in the colors, and right now we're in green here in the Grand Rapids area. Terrence Robinson has done some work on finding the sweet spot. We always said the sweet spot is 8 to 12 millimeters. Well, in this data here for 2018, the sweet spot was from 8.5 up to almost 13 millimeters, right on time. And that shows that on this carbohydrate model. So the percent flowering spurs, if you have 25% or less, we suggest no thinning, or the model suggests no thinning. I think you might still need some thinning, late thinning, to clean off some 1-year-old wood, that, or at least reduce the number of flowers on 1-year-old fruitlets. If you're normal, 51 to 75%, then you use the normal recommendations here. And if you've got a hot, really heavy bloom, which we have this year, they want you to step up your thinning. At the top of the chart, I've already shown you this. Thinning recommendations are indicating how well your thinner might work in color. Green, low risk of over-thinning, and red is very dangerous to over-thinning. Well, at the bottom of the chart, there's also this, the text is colored, and this also gives you a same indication. If the text is blue, it's a mild thinning that is expected. But if it's red, we expect there will be excessive thinning. So this is typically what you see. In the middle of this chart, you see a green shaded area. This is the sweet spot. This is the 200 up to 250 degree days. If you spray during this time period, you can almost guaranteed to get some thinning. Maybe not enough, or maybe a little bit too much, but you basically will get good thinning in that time period from 200 to 250. That's indicated on the charts. So this is 2020 today, Sparta, for the Peach Ridge Weather Station on the 27th of May. It's predicting to apply standard thinning rates. I think you can do that today. You got 84 degrees. Tomorrow you could do it. Apply standard thinning rates. Then it suggests that you decrease your chemical thinning by 15% for the 29th and the 30th. I think I would just use standard rates in that time period. And then on June 2nd, we're going to enter the sweet spot. So if you do some thinning right now, and you don't just do normal thinning at the 6 millimeter stage, which is where most of the fruits are at right now, 6 millimeters, you'll get some good thinning. You probably won't over thin, and you probably will under thin. Then next week you have a chance to do it again, starting on the 2nd of June. Here is the 2020 Sparta Peach Ridge carbohydrate model in graphic form. Whenever it's above zero, no stress is predicted, and therefore very little thinning is predicted. The trees are not as responsive to your thinners. The preferred thinning stress period is from about a -15 to about -40. Now that was on the 4-day model. I think it's probably going to be similar, but maybe not as low as -40. We'll see when we get more experience with it this year. But it's going to be pretty close to that. That's where you do want stress on a tree. That way your thinners will work. If it's over a -40, or I should say lower than a -40, a -50, -75, then there's danger of getting excessive stress and excessive thinning from your thinning application. So this model is helpful in predicting when you will be in excessive thinning situations. And I think that over the next few days, it's going to continue to just flatten the curve like we've done in COVID. The curve is going up right now. It's still at -20, but I think it's going to stick around -10, or excuse me, -20, -15 for the next 5-6 days. I've shown you this before too. We're at 6 millimeter stage. The sweet spot is at 10 to 12 millimeter stage, 8 to 12 millimeters. And that usually corresponds pretty darn good with Terrence Robinson's research. The sweet spot being 200 to 250 degree days base, 4 degrees Celsius after full bloom. So that will be next week, June 2nd. We'll certainly use your chart, use your carbohydrate model and your fruit set models to help you get good thinning. We've got a massive crop coming, it looks like. Yes, that's been thinned out a bit by the frost, and each block is different. You'll have to check your blocks carefully. I would think that if you thinned in the next 2 days, today or tomorrow, you probably will get about 20% thinning on your trees, you probably need 50 to 60% thinning this year because of the tremendous fruit set. I talked about tree row volume last week, and I'm just going to go to this last chart here. A lot of the tall spindles are in that 200-gallon range, 150 to 200-gallon range. And so if it's a 200-gallon range type tree, you really want to increase your rates. If your tree row volume thinning, of course, you have to make the decisions on your block and how healthy they are and how strong they would be able to take thinners and how strong a set might be. Then I want to end with predicted irrigation needs. I was thinking that we're getting close to starting our irrigation on sandy soils for sure until it got 8/10 of an inch of rain this morning. So everybody got rain here the last few days. But basically, in the month of May, we typically use about 2,000 gallons of water per acre per day. 27,154 gallons equals an acre inch. And so when you get into June, you start using about an inch a week, 3/4 to an inch a week. This is the model for 2020. And we were down at 0 with the red line on May 27th, 28th. And of course we were climbing again, but now that's going to be all reset with the rain that we got. It's turning out to be like last year. Every time I tried to talk about irrigation, it would rain another inch. Anyway, we'll keep track of these and advise you over the next month or so. Right now, on the 27th of May, we have a 4,490 gallon deficit. Our trees need that much. So we'll keep track of that. One last thing here, start your calcium sprays. When you get done thinning, we like to start them about 7 days after petal fall. And 7 to 14 days after petal fall. Start your Provide and Novagib sprays for russet and finish. Start feathering trees and leaders. We're getting pretty darn good growth out there with all this heat that we've had, especially older trees, but this year are also getting to the point where they need feathering. And of course, now would be a time to put on a second application of fertilizers now that you can see maybe what your crop is going to be sometime in the next 2 weeks to get things finished off for the year. I'll stop right there, Amy, and we can go to questions.
Okay. You guys can unmute your mics if you want to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat. I don't see any questions in the chat. I did add something to the chat about how you could find the carb model on EnviroWeather. If you've never looked it up, it's actually on the NUA, or it's a New York website, but we've linked the EnviroWeather site to that. So when you click on the apple carb thinning models, the very first model you can choose at the top of the apple folder in EnviroWeather, it takes you to that NUA site, which should look familiar because Phil had screenshots. It should just look like what he showed you. So
with Amy, that's also where the irrigation model is at.
Good point. Yep. And so when you're in NUA, you can skip around to different stations. Just make sure you stay in Michigan. Well, you can look at theirs if you want, but make sure you're paying attention to being in Michigan. So we've kind of merged those two so we could have access to that model. Any questions from anyone? Concerns? Things you want us to add next week? You can always text or email Phil and I and let us know. We're happy to do that.
Amy and Phil, I had a question. This is Kyle Rash.
Hi, Kyle.
Kyle?
So I've been looking at the 4-day carb model prior to this from NUA, and
Yes.
it's had us at a decrease by 50%. And now I just see that the 7-day has us at an apply standard rate. Is there any reason to bear in mind the 4-day as well when we're looking at this, or just completely disregard that?
Disregard the 4-day. They've done a lot of analysis of all their research, and they found that it's a 7-day model that fits the predictions the best. 2 days before an application, the day of an application, and then the 4 days following, for a total of 7 days. Which really, what it does is it flattens the curve out so much. You don't get such high peaks, and you don't get such low ones. So disregard the 4-day model, and just go with the 7-day model.
All right, thank you, Phil. And one more additional question with blossom thinning. Should we be expecting to get some thinning if we did have a bit of a carb stress at that time, a little additional thinning at all?
I would think you would. We have found that at bloom, the fruitlets are not that stressful to the tree. The flower is, but the fruitlets do not use a lot of energy. And so they're not competitive with each other so much. That's why they don't respond to thinning very, very well during the bloom period. And that's true at petal fall as well. So yeah, you'll probably get a little thinning, maybe, well, of course, if you're using a caustic thinner, you will get thinning because they weren't fertilized. But if you're using just a hormonal thinner like NAD or NAA, you will get maybe up to 5% thinning.
Thank you, Phil.